Welcome back to day 22 of my 31 days of Halloween themed drawing tutorials, all right here on YouTube. A new video every single day for October, like today's, where I show you how to draw this creepy, realistic looking eyeball from start to finish. No time lapse, no cuts, no edits. It's all in real time, so if you want to follow along and draw step by step with me, keep watching. All right guys, so let's draw a creepy eyeball. Starting out, I'm using a 3000 by 3000, 300 DPI canvas. For my brush to begin with, I'm gonna use my standard inker Streamline. That's part of my cartooning brush pack that's available now. And then also for my color palette, I've already got this pre-made. So just like the rest of the videos in the series, you can download that color palette and follow along with me with the exact colors that I'm using in today's video. I'll link it in the description below, but if you just go to bjdell.com, go to the YouTube reference page, materials section on there, you can download this, save it to your camera roll, go up to your wrench icon in Procreate, go to add, insert a photo. It's gonna bring it into Procreate as a separate layer here. And then you can just long press on each of the colors to get going. So let's get started. To begin with, of course, the eyeball, we're gonna have kind of like an off-white, white color. So we're not gonna be able to see it that well on an all-white background. So I'm gonna change the background color just to a light gray starting out with. And then I'm gonna go up to my color palette. I'm gonna pick the first color right here on the top row and just draw a big circle here, holding down my finger to lock it in, and then my other finger to make it a perfect circle. Letting up and then dragging and dropping the color in there. I'm gonna grab my transform here, the arrow, and just grab this, put it towards the center there. When those lines connect, you know it's centered. So there we go, we've got the start to our eye. So let's go ahead and get the iris in there next. So to do this, layers, we're gonna slide that one to the left. We're gonna duplicate it. Then we're gonna go back up to our color palette, go into this green on the second row there. I'm gonna drag and drop the color in, and then going up to my arrow again, making sure that uniform is selected. I'm just gonna drag this down, bring it in towards the front of the eye here, so we've got kind of a 3/4 perspective going on. So we've got our iris in there. Going back up to our layers, we're gonna slide that one to the left as well. We're gonna duplicate it. And we're gonna grab our color palette again, go to this dark grayish black color here, drag and drop that one in. So now we've got 3 circles. Grabbing our transform once again, we're just gonna shrink this one down and put it inside the iris. So there we go. We've got our pupil in there now. So you can see really basic shapes, super quick, super easy to get this eye started. So now we need to go in and start adding some details, making this thing look realistic. So I think the first thing I want to do is, starting with the iris, add in the details there. So with that selected, we're going to go ahead and add a new layer. And we're going to set this to clipping mask. So this is going to allow us to draw, and it's not going to go outside of what's on that green circle. So now that we've got that set as clipping mask, we're going to go back up to our colors here. We're going to go to this dark green color. It's the first color on the second row. Once again, still using my standard inker Streamline. And I'm gonna start drawing just some kind of tapered lines coming out and around inside the iris. And you'll see here, I'm using different sizes, different line weights as I come in. And I'm just basically coming in here towards the center. And it's basically a kind of like a, I guess, starburst thing going on, kind of radiating there from that center. And I'm just going to alternate these lines, pull these around, going with this darker one here in the back, and then we're going to go in with a lighter one towards the front. Let's get some more of these in here, just all different shapes and sizes and thicknesses. Like this. Continuing around here towards the front. And we'll just get a couple more in here as they come in towards the front now. I'm starting to kind of not do as many. Going back up to my color palette now, I want to go to this green color here. And these I'm going to start pulling in now towards the front. I'm going to drop my size a little bit since there's not as much area to cover up here. Again, some thick ones, some lighter ones, some thinner ones coming around, and just alternating as we go. This one I'm going to erase because it's kind of, whoops, not the exact direction that it needs to be. Once again, just back and forth here. Get these in here as we go along, and then as we come here to the back, then I'll start to kind of just put some here and there, but I want these to be fewer and further in between. All right, so there we go. We've got the shapes in there that we want. So now we're going to go ahead and make these look a little bit more realistic and better. So to do this, once again on this layer, I'm going to go up to my smudge and soft airbrush, which is part of the airbrushing set that comes with Procreate. That's what we're going to do to smudge these. And then I'm just going to start pulling down here from the center the way that the direction of these go. You'll see I'm just going to start coming around back and forth to kind of work these in. This really gives off that nice starburst effect around that iris. So even though we started out with a pretty solid, heavy lined brush, this allows us to get that more kind of realistic fade to everything. Softens everything up, makes it look more realistic. Just keep going around here and working those in. Almost back to where we started. Lighten that one up a little bit, blend it in a little bit more so it's not as thick on that one. We go back in one more time here and add another smaller line there. All right, there we go. So we've got the center of our iris done now. As you can see, those are kind of blurred. Everything else though has that really hard line to it. So I want to blur up everything else too, just to make it look a little bit more realistic. So to do this, we're going to go down to layer 1. We're going to go up to our adjustments here, and we're going to go to Gaussian blur and layer. We're just going to slide this probably just to about maybe around there, maybe 2%. So you see it's got a little bit of a blur to the side. It doesn't have that hard edge, so we want things to blend in just a little bit more. We're going to do the same thing to the iris now. Once again, going up to the adjustments layer, go into the Gaussian blur, sliding this to about 2, maybe 2.5 on that one. And same thing here with the pupil. Back up to adjustments, blur, layer, and maybe about 2.5 on this one. Or so, close enough. So there we go. We've got the start of that. Let's go ahead and add some shadows now to the iris since we're working on that. So let's go ahead and make a new layer. We're going to go ahead and set this to clipping mask. Going back up to my colors, I'm going to select black here. Going back to my brush, I want to actually use that soft airbrush that we used for blending, but I'm going to use it to color in now. So we're using the airbrush. This is available in Procreate. It's just one of the default brushes that are available that you get with the program or the app. So we'll just bring in just a shadow there along the back to make this pop a little bit more there. Now I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to make another new layer and let's add in a highlight. Of course, we've got the light source coming in from this direction. So I'm going to set this layer. Once I made that, I'm going to set this to clipping mask as well. Going back up to my color palette, I'm gonna go to white. My brush, I'm gonna switch back to that standard Inker Streamline. That's my cartooning brush. And I'm just gonna pull a highlight here around the front, just like that. And then I'm also gonna pull one down here around the bottom as well. So we've got that in there. Once again, this is a very thick, hard-lined line here, so we want to change those up. So we're going to use that blur again, going back up to our adjustments layer, Gaussian blur, layer. We're just going to slide this to the right to get those to blur in as my iPad starts to die, right there. So we've got that started. Let's go ahead and add some highlights to the actual pupil here. So I'm going to make a new layer here. This we really don't have to set to clipping mask because it's going to be right here in the center. So we don't have to really worry about going out, and we want it to overlap both of these, both the pupil and the iris. So get those in there. Once again, going back up to my adjustments layer, Gaussian blur, layer, and sliding these so we just get a really nice glow and shine on those. I think that looks good there. Now let's work on the pupil itself. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer. This one I am going to set to clipping mask, so it stays just on that black pupil part. Colors, I'm going to switch back to my black here. And then for this, I'm actually just going to go ahead and airbrush this by hand. So once again, airbrushing here. And I'm just going to pull along black here along the back. Kind of fade that up towards the center. And then same thing here, grabbing some white. Just going to pull white along the edge here. And also some here in the center as well. We got a nice, just kind of fading highlight there. I'm going to go back in and just erase a tad bit to drop it down just a little bit, get it a little bit softer. All right, there we go. So we've got the inside part of the eye done. Let's go ahead now, and I think I want to add in next, we'll add in some kind of veins coming around the back here. I think that'll look cool. So we're going to go back down to layer 1. We're going to make a new layer. We're going to set this as clipping mask. I'm going to go up to my colors. I've got this reddish pink right here. Once again, my brush, I'm going to switch back to my cartooning brush here. And I'm going to zoom in here a little bit to see a little bit better. I'm just going to pull in some kind of heavy veins coming around the back here. Heavier towards the base and then kind of tapering out there in the front as they come up. And with that, it's just basically letting go, letting off the pressure as you start pulling up. That's the key to get that nice taper there. One there, do another one down here, pulling down and around. More here, and then pulling another one there along the bottom, kind of like we did at the top. All right, so we've got the veins coming around the back there. Have this one kind of swoop up a little bit more. So once again, those look a little hard lined. So let's go ahead and blur those. Going back to our adjustments layer, going to Gaussian blur layer. We're just going to slide this and make these a little bit softer. Maybe about right there, maybe about 3. I think that looks pretty good, about 3. Maybe 3.3. There we go. I'm going to go back in here and just kind of erase this. As it blurred, it kind of moved up a little bit. Let's bring that in. And then they're still kind of bright, so I'm going to go in here to my layers, select my blend mode. I'm just going to drop the opacity of these down so they're not super crazy bright. And there we go. I think that looks good. So now let's start working on the shadows and the highlights for the eye. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer here on top of those. I'm going to set this to clipping mask as well. And then for my color, I'm going to come back in here and select this kind of golden brown. Going back to my brush library, I'm going to go back down to airbrush. And then I'm just going to start to kind of pull a shadow here around the back, just kind of building up that three-dimensional quality of the eye. It's heavier here towards the back and then kind of tapers there towards the front on both the top and the bottom. Just kind of going around a few times there, and then if I don't like it, if it's too bright, hitting the end there and dropping down the opacity, you can adjust that to make some changes. I'm going to pull a little bit just around the front here. I don't want it too much. Just to kind of separate that part. Tad bit around the back, but not too much because it doesn't really indent there too much. It's not like it's giving off a shadow. I just want a little break there between the two. So there's that. Let's go ahead now, and I'm going to add in some highlights now to the eye itself. So once again here, I'm going to make a new layer. Set this to clipping mask. Colors, I'm going to change this to white. And then my brush, I'm going to come back in with, once again, my standard Inker Streamline. And I'm just going to do just a big highlight here along the front. Do another one down here along this, maybe one along the front of that eye here too. I don't want it up to that shadow where I did, just kind of on the side like that. And then we'll have another one come down here as well. All right, so now that we've got those in there, once again, going up to our adjustments, going to Gaussian blur, go into layer. Just gonna start to slide this until we just get a nice shine off of those. Now that we've got those in there, I'm gonna go back down to that layer that I did the golden brown on. I'm gonna go back in with my airbrush, and I'm just gonna hit just real lightly around these so it kind of brings out those shadows even more. We'll see how that does the work for you as far as kind of making those a little bit more apparent. Kind of bringing a line around here as well, and then coming back in with the white. I'm gonna hit another just small highlight here with my airbrush around this section there. All right, I think that looks good. So now let's bring this home a little bit more. To do this, we're gonna switch over to black. I'm gonna go back down, make a new layer on top of that layer with the shadows. And with the black, dropping the opacity down and the size up, I'm just gonna come around here and just start to build up some of those shadows even more that we just did. Coming around the highlights is gonna bring those out even a little more. I don't think I want it too much right there. Bring those around like so. I think that looks good. And now I'm going to go back in here to my layer with the veins on it. I'm going to make a new layer here. Once again, with my cartooning streamline set here, I'm just going to come in and switch this to white. Just going to add in some highlights there across the top of these. Makes the veins a little bit more three-dimensional as well. Not going quite to the edge, kind of coming in from the side there, just because I am going to blur this a tad bit. So when I blur it, I want it to stay on the vein. So there's those. We'll go ahead and go to our adjustments. Our blur again. Blur those just a little bit. And then going back in here underneath the vein layer, we're going to make a new layer. Pull that underneath. And then I'm going to go back in with my black. Bring my opacity way down on this and just kind of hit Once again, with my airbrushing, I'm just gonna hit under here just a little bit. Just need to get the size right here to show up. There we go. I'll just hit under there ever so slightly. That gives those a little bit more 3-dimension to them. So from here, let's go ahead and do a background. So I'm gonna go down to my bottom layer, make a new layer, drag and drop this down there, and then I'm gonna go ahead and just fill this in with black. And then from here, I'm gonna make a new layer then on top of that. And I'm gonna switch over my brush to, let's use the texture pack, and let's go to cardboard. And then using this light gray color to begin with, I'm just gonna go in here and throw in some texture. Make sure I'm on the right layer here, yep. Throw in some texture here. You can see it starts to add it in, but it's really dark still, so we're gonna go back in with white now and start to throw in some white over top as well. So now we got that nice texture coming through there. Then I kind of want to vignette this too, so we're going to come back in with black now, just around the edges and the sides. Kind of do a nice vignette around here. Make it pop even more and kind of bring even more attention to the eyeball there. All right, so there we go. And then once you have that done, you might look at the background and say, okay, well, I could get away with adding a little bit more. So if you wanted to go back in and add some more shadows to the design to make them just everything a little bit darker, you go back in here then with your airbrush and kind of darken up certain areas to bring those home even more. It's totally up to you how far you want to go with it, how much back and forth you really want to kind of do to get everything to look exactly like you want it. You could take hours just kind of building this up and getting it more and more realistic, moving into that realm of just like hyper realism. I think this is fairly close, but then again, I mean, this is only 20 minutes. So think of what you could do with a few hours just going back and forth and really kind of building up just subtle changes and values and subtle changes and highlights. You could get away with some really cool stuff. So last but not least then, I want to go ahead and make a new layer here and sign this. So going back up to my cartooning set and a lighter color. It's a little bit too thin. Just get this signed and then we'll be done with, what is this, day 22 of my 31 days of Halloween. There you go. Kind of hyper realistic, creepy eyeball just floating there for day 22. Still got over a week left, so hopefully you guys will join me for the rest of these videos. If you like today's video though, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell for notifications so you can get alerted when I post these new videos and then more after this series. If you guys do designs based on these tutorials and you post them online, I want to see them. So if you post them on Instagram or Twitter, tag me at BJDell, or you can also post them on Facebook. I've got a group over there called Keep Creating, a group for artists by artists. I will leave the link in the description below, a place where you can share your artwork based on these tutorials or anything, give feedback, get feedback, meet new friends. It's an awesome place to be and want you guys to be a part of it. As for me, I can also be found online, bjdell.com, and my podcast, Make Money With Your Art. It's linked down in the description, but you can find it anywhere podcasts are available. So that's it for me. I will be back tomorrow. Will you? I hope so. So until next time, keep creating.